Discipline has to come from within you. Every time nobody's watching, your real discipline gets tested. Last week, you looked at a plate of food you swore you wouldn't touch, and you passed. No tribe, no eyes. Here's what's actually happening inside you. And it starts with one marshmallow in a small room in California. You're not missing willpower. You're missing training for a skill your own brain already knows how to build. Picture that room. Stanford University's Bing Nursery School, late 1960s. Plain walls, a faint smell of crayons in the air, a small wooden table, one chair, a clock ticking somewhere out of sight. A 4-year-old sits alone, one marshmallow on a plate in front of her. A silver bell sits beside it. A researcher named Walter Mischel explains the rules, then leaves. Ring the bell, eat the marshmallow now. Wait and get two. The door closes. No fire, no tribe, no eyes in the room at all. Only a one-way mirror on the far wall, and behind it, a researcher taking notes nobody in that chair could see. What does a 4-year-old do with nobody watching? Some children stared straight at the marshmallow and lasted seconds, licking their lips before ringing the bell. Others turned their chairs completely around, facing the wall instead of the plate. Would you have thought to do that at 4 years old? One girl covered her own eyes with both hands. Another sang quietly to herself, over and over until the researcher returned. Mischel's team noticed something nobody expected. The children who waited the longest weren't gritting their teeth harder than the others. They weren't locked in some internal battle of pure willpower. They were doing something else entirely, changing what their own mind was looking at. Changing it to what, exactly? In one version of the experiment, children were asked to imagine the marshmallow as only a picture, a fluffy white cloud behind a frame of glass, not a real treat at all. That single mental trick dramatically increased how long they could wait. Nothing in the room had changed. Only the picture inside their heads had changed. Is discipline really just staring down a temptation until you win? That's the twist almost nobody expects. The winning move was never a war. It was a redirect, a small piece of mental sleight of hand the child ran quietly inside her own skull, with nobody there to see it and nobody there to enforce it. So if nobody enforced it, where did the redirect actually live? Discipline didn't live in the marshmallow. It didn't live in the researcher, the bell, or the door. It lived entirely inside the minds of 4-year-old children who had never read a single study about themselves. No village had trained those children. No coach stood in the corner, clipboard in hand. No older sibling watched from the window to report back later. Whatever kept that hand off the plate was built somewhere behind those small eyes and nowhere else. But a party trick with candy proves nothing on its own. Did any of this actually matter 20 years later? In 1990, Mischel's research team tracked down those same children, now teenagers scattered across different high schools and different lives entirely. Among the measures they gathered, each teenager's SAT score. The ones who'd waited longest for the second marshmallow back when they were 4 were scoring higher on those tests more than a decade later. Same kids, same original room. The same self-control that showed up in that room with no one watching was still showing up years later. Could a single internal habit really predict an entire life? A completely separate research team wanted a much bigger, harder test of that exact question. Could self-control on its own really shape a person's whole future? Starting in the 1970s, a research team led by psychologists Terry Moffat and Avshalom Caspi began following 1,000 children born in Dunedin, New Zealand. No marshmallows this time, no small wooden table, just clipboards, classroom observations, and the same 1,000 names tracked year after year. Teachers, parents, and the children themselves rated each child's self-control, not once, but repeatedly, from age 3 all the way through adolescence. Then the researchers waited and waited. 32 years. What does 32 years of waiting actually prove? By 2011, those children were adults with careers, bank accounts, medical charts, sometimes criminal records. The team pulled every file, dental x-rays, blood pressure readings from decades of checkups, financial records, court records. The children who'd shown less self-control at age 3, decades before, now had worse health as adults. Higher blood pressure, more breathing problems, deeper credit card debt, more convictions on record. The children with more self-control back then now had better outcomes on nearly every single measure, and this held true even after accounting for differences in IQ and family wealth. The same gradient held across the entire study. Coincidence? Nobody in that Dunedin nursery was rationing meat. No tribal fire watched those toddlers. No banner of watching eyes hung over their school desks. The prediction still held 3 decades later anyway. Here's the part that actually changes everything, though. Children whose self-control improved as they grew older ended up with better adult outcomes than their early childhood scores alone would have predicted. The trait wasn't fixed at 3 years old and frozen there forever. It could still improve afterward from the inside. So which is it? A trait you're stuck with, or a skill you can still train? Discipline, it turns out, isn't simply a fixed personality you're born with or without. Think about what both studies are actually pointing at. Not an external cage keeping bad impulses in check. Not a crowd of eyes forcing good behavior out of fear. Not a fire, a jar, or a courthouse waiting somewhere down the road. So where was the real enforcer hiding this whole time? An internal, learnable move. Redirect attention, reframe the object of desire, rehearse the skill until it becomes automatic. A muscle nobody else can flex for you. Built quietly inside your own mind, exactly where it was at 4 years old. Why does gritting your teeth against a craving usually fail by 10 p.m.? Because gritting your teeth was never the actual mechanism. You were fighting the marshmallow face-to-face instead of turning your chair around. Why do some people seem to resist temptation almost effortlessly? They built the redirect years ago, and now it fires without a fight at all, the same way a muscle stops feeling heavy once it's trained. Why does willpower feel like it runs out by the end of a long day? Because most people never trained the actual skill in the first place. They've spent years white-knuckling a battle that was never supposed to be a battle. Nobody handed them a plate, a bell, and a one-way mirror, and told them the win was in the redirect, not the fight. So what does this actually mean for tonight, when the phone is sitting face up on the nightstand at 11 p.m.? It means the fix was never a stronger cage around your phone. It means making the same mental turn before the scrolling even starts, just as that 4-year-old once turned away from the plate. Decide the exact redirect in advance. Phone in another room. Charger across the hallway. A single sentence rehearsed ahead of time. This feed will still be here in the morning. One small mental picture swapped for another, the same way a marshmallow became a cloud behind glass. Rehearse the same redirect enough times, and it stops feeling like effort at all. That's not a metaphor. That's what Mischel's 4-year-olds demonstrated, and what 3 decades of Dunedin data strongly supported afterward. You don't need someone watching your hands in firelight. You don't need a jar with eyes printed above it. You don't need a courthouse file arriving in the mail decades from now. You needed the mental move rehearsed enough times that your own brain runs it automatically. Lasting discipline was never going to come from outside you. There was no village standing by to enforce it, no fire, no audience, no bell but your own. It had to come from within you, because that's the only place it was ever actually built. One rehearsed redirect at a time, in a small room, with nobody watching at all.